Hello, and welcome to the fourth and final chapter of our video series designed to share insight into the selection, seeding, and bracketing process for the Division I Women's Basketball Championship. In this chapter, we will show you how the bracket comes together. When it comes to bracketing, it's important to note that starting with the 2023 championship, the regional rounds are played at 2 sites with 8 teams competing at each site. This is a change from the previous format that featured 4 regional sites with 4 teams at each site. This move will be great for the student-athlete and fan experience. Though the bracketing principles have not changed, having 2 sites instead of 4 will allow the committee more discretion when placing teams into regional pods, which we'll walk you through in a moment. In addition, the committee recently determined that each site would host 2 Sweet 16 regional semifinal games on Friday and Saturday, while each site will host an Elite 8 regional championship game on Sunday and Monday. Here, you see an example of the schedule for each regional site, which are labeled Site 1 and Site 2. At each site, there will be 2 pods with 4 teams. For example, at Regional Site 1, the 4 teams in Pod A will compete in Friday's regional semifinals, and winning teams will advance to Sunday's regional final. In Pod B, the teams will compete in Saturday's regional semifinals, and winning teams will advance to Monday's regional final. 2 teams from each regional site will then advance to the Women's Final Four. This schedule is identical for both regional sites. There are several bracketing principles by which the committee must abide. Before we dive into those principles, here is a general summary of the 4 regional pods on the bracket. There are 16 seeds in each of the 4 regional pods. Teams on each seed line, number 1, number 2, number 3, etc., are generally close to being equal. For example, teams seeded 5th in their respective regional pod are ranked 17, 18, 19, and 20 on the overall seed list, which you will recall is the committee's ranking of the 68 tournament teams. There are 4 groups within each regional pod, which are grouped together to form pairings for first and second round matchups. Shaded in light green, one group is made up of seeds 1, 8, 9, and 16. In the first round, the 1 seed plays the 16 and the 8 seed plays the 9. The winners of those games play in the second round. The other 3 groups work similarly and are color-coded as well. They include seeds 4 versus 13 and 5 versus 12, which are shaded in dark green, 2 versus 15 and 7 versus 10, which are shaded in light blue, and 3 versus 14 and 6 versus 11, which are shaded in dark blue. Each of these groups is assigned to the same first and second round site, which is hosted on the campus of the top 4 seeds. Here are some of the important bracketing principles. Each of the first 4 teams selected from a conference shall be placed in different regional pods if they are seated on the first 4 lines. Teams from the same conference shall not meet prior to the regional final if they played each other 3 or more times during the regular season and conference tournament. The committee will attempt to keep conference teams from meeting until the regional final round. If the committee is unable to balance the bracket after exhausting all possible options, it has the flexibility to permit 2 teams from the same conference to meet each other after the first round. As shown here, each of the 4 regional pods is a column. Within each pod, teams placed on lines shaded in yellow could meet in the regional semifinal. The same is true of the white lines within each regional pod. Winning teams from the yellow and white lines within a regional pod will meet in the regional final. The last 4 at-large teams on the overall seed list, as well as teams seeded 65 through 68, will be paired to compete in the first 4 games on Wednesday and Thursday following the announcement of the field. If there are no conflicts, the last at-large team on the seed list will be paired with the second-to-last at-large team on the seed list. The other first 4 games will consist of the third-to-last at-large team on the seed list playing the fourth-to-last at-large team on the seed list, as well as seed 65 versus 66 and seed 67 versus 68. The winners of the first 4 games will advance to a first-round game at the site at which they are currently competing. Under additional considerations, if possible, rematches of non-conference regular season games should be avoided in the first 4 and first and second rounds. Any principle can be relaxed if 2 or more teams from the same conference are among the last 4 at-large seeded teams participating in the first 4 games. After examining the previous 2 years' brackets, the committee shall attempt to avoid moving teams or conferences out of their natural region or geographic area an inordinate number of times. If possible, rematches from the previous tournament should be avoided in the first and second rounds. First and second round sites will be awarded to the top 16 seeded teams that submit a bid that meets the requirements for hosting. In the event that a top 16 seeded team does not submit a bid, or the bid does not meet requirements for hosting, the committee will select a host from the remaining submitted bids that meet the requirements for hosting. In order to adhere to the bracketing principles, it may not be possible to select the next highest seed to host. The first 4 games will be assigned, 1 to each of the 4 first and second round sites, based on the bracket placement of teams participating in the first 4 games. For the regional competition, a team may not be assigned to play in any arena in which it has played more than 3 regular season games, not including conference postseason tournaments. A team outside of the top 4 seed lines may be moved 1 bracket line from its true seed line, for example, from a number 13 seed line to a number 12 seed line when it is placed in the bracket, if necessary to meet the principles. The committee begins the process of placing teams into the bracket by order of the S-curve. The S-curve is made up of the overall seed list that is created by and then used by the committee when it comes to bracketing decisions. It's called the S-curve because it snakes through the seeding list based on groupings for each seed from 1 to 68. By order of the S-curve, the committee will assign each team to a regional and first and second round site by taking into account distance from site, mode of transportation, and accessibility of fans. The overall number 1 seed is placed in the closest regional site as the top seed in that regional pod, followed by the overall number 2 and number 3 seeds being assigned to the closest regional pod. The 4th of the number 1 seeds gets the region pod that remains vacant. The committee may relax the principle of keeping teams as close to their area of natural interest for teams seated on the number 2 line to avoid, for example, the overall number 5 seed being sent to the same region as the overall number 1 seed. The committee then places the number 2 seeds, teams ranked 5 through 8 on the overall seed list, in the bracket using the same geographic principles. However, movement can take place based on other principles that take precedent over geography. For example, the top 4 teams from a conference have to be placed in separate regions. The committee then places the 4 number 3 seeds, teams ranked 9 through 12 on the overall seed list, and the 4 number 4 teams, seeds ranked 13 through 16, into the bracket, using the same principles. After the top 4 seed lines have been assigned, the committee will review the relative strengths of the regions by adding the true seed numbers in each region to determine if any severe numerical imbalance exists. Generally, no more than 5 points should separate the lowest and highest total. Once the committee has the top 16 teams placed in their respective regional pods, it begins the process of assigning first and second round on-campus sites based on the location of the top 16 teams. Once that takes place, we know that the number 1, 8, 9, and 16 seeds in that region, for example, will be at the same site for first and second rounds. These 4 teams will play at the campus site of the number 1 team. Similarly, the number 2 seeds will be paired with the 7, 10, and 15 seeds from their regional pod. These 4 teams will play at the campus site of the number 2 team. The number 3 seeds will be paired with the 6, 11, and 14 seeds from their regional pod. These 4 teams will play at the campus site of the number 3 team. And the number 4 seeds will be paired with the 5, 12, and 13 seeds from their regional pod. These 4 teams will play at the campus site of the number 4 team. Once the committee begins the process of bracketing the 5 through 16 seeds, they will assign each team by order of the S-curve to a regional and first and second round site by taking into account distance from site, mode of transportation, and accessibility by fans. However, various bracketing principles may cause a change. Because of these principles, teams sometimes have to travel great distances. For example, a team could be assigned to a city farther away to avoid playing a conference rival. The following video shows the process for how first four teams will be determined and placed in the overall bracket. The Division I Women's Basketball Committee will use the selection principles and procedures to select and seed 68 teams. To demonstrate which 8 teams will play in the first 4 games, we will use this example of an overall seed list of teams. The designation of each team as either an automatic qualifier, AQ, or at-large, AL, is also shown. 2 of the first 4 games will involve the last 4 at-large teams that made it into the tournament, shown here in yellow. The other 2 games will involve seeds 65 to 68, shown here in green. Because the first 4 game winners advance into the first round, they will play for 1 seed spot as shown here. In the final step, the committee places all teams into the bracket using the bracketing principles. Although this example shows 2 of the first 4 games being 11 seeds, that may not always be the case, as it is based on what the overall seed positions are for those last 4 at-large teams. I will also note that the first 4 games may not always fall into different regions as shown in this example. Here is an example of how it might look in the bracket. There are additional considerations for the committee. These aren't principles that the group must abide by, but still the committee will try to avoid a bracket in which rematches of non-conference games take place in the first 4 or first and second rounds. Additionally, the committee will attempt to keep conference teams from meeting until the regional final round. The committee will also try to avoid having a team move out of its natural region or geographic area in consecutive years, and they also try to avoid first and second round rematches from the prior year's tournament. It's worth mentioning that all of this work is to construct a single bracket. Depending on the schedule of games being played in a handful of conference championship games on Selection Sunday, the committee will need contingency brackets based on those results. It could mean a team moves up or down on the seed list, and any change in the sequence of teams could mean changes to the bracket. That's a lot to digest, isn't it? The committee goes to great lengths to ensure it is abiding by all these principles so that it can set up the most competitively balanced tournament as possible. The announcement of the bracket triggers a flurry of other championship-related activity that includes the following: 68 teams booking 68 charter aircrafts with NCAA travel, 68 hotel room lists submitted to 68 team hotels, 68 teams determine hotel meals and catering during championship play, 68 teams, coaches, administrators, spirit squads, and bands prepare for travel to host sites, 68 practice times assigned, 68 buses in host cities booked and assigned, NCAA committee and committee representatives assigned to sites and finalized travel, 116 basketball officials and referees chosen and assigned to specific sites, games, and book travel. Media determine assignments, apply for credentials, and book travel. We hope you enjoyed this video series and gained some insight into the selection, seeding, and bracketing process for the Division I Women's Basketball Championship. Now that we have gone through the committee resources and covered the selection, seeding, and bracketing process, we would love to get your feedback. Please email NCAA Women's Basketball at diwbkb@ncaa.org with any comments or questions you might have. What's in store for this year's championship? Here's the committee chair with the details on what to expect.
Hello. My name is Lisa Peterson, and I'm the Senior Associate Commissioner for Sport Management for the Pac-12 Conference and the Chair of the NCAA Women's Basketball Committee. On behalf of our entire Women's Basketball Committee, I'd like to thank you all for taking part in our selection, seeding, and bracketing video series. Before we conclude, I'd like to provide you with additional information regarding the upcoming 2023 NCAA Division I Women's Basketball Championship. Coming off a season in which we set a record for attendance at our first and second round sites, the first week of the championship will again be utilizing a format in which the top 16 seeds will host games at their respective campus sites, with 4 of those sites serving as the host of the first 4 games. New in 2023, the championship will go from 4 regional hosting sites to 2, with Greenville, South Carolina, and Seattle, Washington serving as our 2 Sweet 16 host sites. Both cities will feature 8 Sweet 16 teams apiece, with each regional site hosting a series of games over a 4-day period, culminating with 2 regional championship games apiece. It should be quite the experience for all involved. The 4 teams still standing at the end of regional play will then head to Dallas, Texas, and compete for a chance to win the national championship at the 2023 Women's Final Four, which will be played March 31st and April 2nd at the American Airlines Center. Included in the festivities in Dallas will be a celebration around the 50th anniversary of Title IX that has all 3 women's basketball divisional national championships decided over a 24-hour period on April 1st and 2nd at the American Airlines Center. The Division II and III national title games will be played on Saturday, with the Division I title game played on Sunday, with the ABC broadcasting the Division I national championship game for the first time. We thank you for taking the time to participate in this video series. We hope it has been helpful in lifting the curtain on the role of the committee in the selection, seeding, and bracketing process, and it's our hope that this season ahead is the best ever.